Welcome to the Hog's Eye. It's Saturday, October 7th. It's the bye week, and we have two guests for you today, just in case you were worried you wouldn't get more hard-hitting reports from us. First up is friend of the show and USA Today's sports editor, Lake Lewis, and we'll be joined afterwards by Brandon Thorn of Inside the Pylon and FanRag Sports. It's a jam-packed show today. Don't go away. It's the Hog's Eye.
By fans, for fans, the Hog Style. And now, here's your host, Sean Conti.
Our guest today is Lake Lewis. He's a real jack of all trades, from writing and reporting to podcasting and even presiding as CEO over at sportstraining.com. He's a sports editor at USA Today Sports and at Redskins Wire. So put your hands together for Lake Lewis. We're very glad to have him. Welcome to the show, Lake. How are you, man?
I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, hell yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got some great questions, sort of some general questions and a little more specific questions to get your take on where we are here about a quarter of the way through the season. So, if you're ready, can you give us the big headlines? What are you noticing so far through 4 games from the Redskins? What's the biggest thing that's jumping out to you?
I would have to say defense first. The defense is actually one of the better units in the NFL, and that's almost sounds absurd, considering what we've seen and witnessed over the past several seasons. And I think that's a big reason why this team right now feels like they can compete and potentially, maybe, compete for the divisional crown and get into the playoffs. One of the other storylines that jumps out to me is the emergence of Chris Thompson. And I think that
it's a great one.
In this defense, when you lose a guy like Deshaun Jackson, a big play guy, and even Pierre Garçon, who's come up big, over the course of his time when he was here, I think to be able to find another complementary player in a different realm. Chris is doing this from the running back position, and we haven't seen that kind of explosiveness probably going back to maybe Clinton Portis when he first got here from Denver. So I think those two elements have totally changed the outlook of this team right now as they're still trying to figure out, offensively who's reliable and who won't be injured on Sundays.
Right.
Well, you mentioned Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson, who are obviously gone. I think what's first and foremost on the fans' minds is Terrell Pryor and Josh Jackson, and their growth and development. What is the team seeing in both of those guys as of Game 4?
I mean, they're super talented guys, and I've been high on Josh. Last year, before he even had the Achilles injury, you could see that he had some special talents.
Sure.
This year in training camp, he was one of my star players in training camp. He could not be covered. I don't care if you put Norman on him or if you put Breland on him. He was doing what he wanted to do out on the field. The thing that stood out also, though, was his lack of animation. I mean, he's a quiet kid, and I think people have to understand this locker room used to have 2 alpha dog receivers in Pierre and Deshaun, who complained when they didn't get the ball, who complained when they felt like they weren't part of the offense to help them succeed. And now you're looking at Josh, and then on the other side, you've got Terrell Pryor, who is another, I don't ever want to say things to people, but Terrell's a guy to me that is just, he's almost aloof at times. He's just so quiet and different that I think now you're talking about your 2 guys on the outside that when you look at them physically, you expect them to just be, boisterous monsters because they're so big, but they're two quietest guys I think I've ever seen in the locker room. They're
very atypical for wide receivers, it sounds like.
Do you think Terrell?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Do you think this racial incident in Kansas City is going to have any sort of long-term effect on Terrell?
No, I don't. And having been there for the game, and I didn't hear that. I didn't. I mean, I'm African American, and I can say I did not hear that said. I heard a lot of other things said that the fans were just being jerk fans. Let's call it like it is. But I think for Terrell to explode the way he did, some of that to me thinks that's just frustration in general that just finally boiled over.
Sure.
I mean, I talked to a lot of other guys who actually went in the tunnel at that specific moment, and they said they didn't hear it either, and that's why you didn't see any other reactions from anyone else. So I'm not saying it didn't happen. I would never say that. I don't know that for sure. But it just seemed to me that there was another layer to this, and let's face it, this is a guy that a lot has been expected of. Played well in Kansas City. He came up with that big touchdown catch in the first quarter. But by and large, he's been a disappointment to a lot of people. And they're not going to give up on him because I think you guys can see with your own eyes too. The talent's there. It's just a matter of, is he what they want him to be? And for my money, he's not a number one receiver. He's just not. He's a very good receiver, and he could be a nice complementary piece if there was a dog on the other side. And I think that they're trying to make that Josh Doxson, and that's why they drafted Doxson to be that guy.
So speaking of that, now that we're in the bye week, we know Kirk stuck around and is like hanging around Ashburn. He's just got the kid too, so obviously he wasn't planning a big trip. Are any of these other guys on the offense who, are kind of still struggling to find rhythm, are any of them also around to kind of keep working with him in the bye week? I know, like, they can't be told to, but, guys sometimes volunteer to do a little extra work here and there.
I don't think so. And, I mean, I know a lot of the guys live right here in my neighborhood. No, not really.
No.
I think this is a group that is banged up, first of all. They need all the days off they can get. They need the rest. And let's face it, this isn't an 0-4 football team or a 1-3 team. This is a team that, for my money, only played one poor game all year, and that was the Eagles game. And by the way, they had the ball with 2 minutes left with a chance to go down and get a game-winning touchdown. So I just think that they're a team that realizes that they're better than maybe they even expected at this point. I think they feel like they could be good. But I think this team, I know from talking with guys and being in the locker room, there's a confidence I haven't seen in this team in some time. And I think it's because the offense knows that they haven't really come out yet. They know that they've played some inspired football the last 2 weeks. The running game's been okay. But I think they know they're going to get better. And they're starting to see, let's just put it this way, guys. That pass from Kirk to Josh Doxson at the end of the game, Kirk doesn't make a throw ever in his career to anyone. That was a 50-50 ball. The throw he made to Terrell Pryor in the first quarter, he never makes that throw in his career. That's a 50-50 ball. So now he's starting to believe that these guys can go up and make a play, and that's just something that comes over time and being familiar with the guys you're throwing the ball to. Once Jordan comes back, which he should be fully healthy coming back from the bye for San Francisco, now you're going to see the game open up for Jamison Crowder a lot more too, who's almost been an afterthought because the dynamics of the offense haven't been in place for Jamison to get off. So now everything should come into play, and I think that that's where the confidence in the team comes because they know the offense has carried them the last 2-3 years since Kirk's been the starter. They just didn't have any defense. Well, the defense has been carrying them this year, and once the offense catches up, this is a perfect time to see the storm develop. And I think this team's really getting ready to make a nice run here, too.
Sure. Hey, we want to ask you some questions about defense, but you just mentioned the running game a second ago, and I have to ask before we switch, what do you think is in store for this team in the future at that running back position? Is it a guy? Is there someone on this team that's the answer, or are we looking for a new name next year? What do you think?
I think, in Jay's offense, they don't need I'm a Penn State alum, and I would love to see Saquon Barkley. That's not going to happen here. I don't think this offense is set up for that type of back. I think it's who's hot is going to get the ball. Obviously, Chris has been hot, and that's why you've seen him with the ball. Monday night, he took Chris out the game. Kansas City keyed on him. So it was like, who's going to step up after that? I thought Jay got away from the run in the game, actually, in the second half. It would have been nice to have seen them run a little bit more, but P. Ryan fumbled, and I know you guys know this too. When a young guy fumbles, and that's not the first time we've seen him do that, you kind of start losing a little bit of trust there a little bit. So I think that they have enough at the running back position to really make this work with what they have. I think the role they're using Chris in makes him that home run threat, that playmaker. So I think they're good at the position, and I think you're going to see it evolve even more. We've all known that Jay wanted to run the football a lot more than Sean did. That's a fact. Jay called 2 games last year. He called the Green Bay game and the Minnesota game, and you look at the numbers, that was their 2 most balanced games all year. That's the way he calls games. So they're going to run the ball a lot more, but are they going to have a guy that's going to pop off for 150 to 160 yards? Probably not. It'll be by committee.
I didn't know that, actually, that Jay called.
Oh, fair enough.
Games. I don't think that's as common knowledge as the beat reporters might think.
Yeah, no, that's a good insight. If
see what we can do.
we can really run the ball. Let's get a couple defensive questions in here before we run out of time. I think the number one question on fans' minds is Zach Brown. He's obviously been a superstar out there for us. Is there any chance that the Redskins are going to try to negotiate a long-term deal with this guy before the end of the year?
Well, you can't. You can't sign a guy to a contract during the actual season. So everything. I mean, I just wrote this about Kirk yesterday that I think his play is warranted. That they have to sign the guy. You just have to make him a long-term deal. But nothing can happen until after the season. So to kind of give you a glimpse of Zach Brown, the Redskins would absolutely be stupid to not give him the money that he's going to ask for, because he has made that defense night and day much better. He gives them something in the middle of the field. He gives them a dog on the field. And, between him and a guy like Swearinger, who are just nasty players on the field, the defense's whole dynamic has changed to fit those personalities. So I don't think they can offer him anything during the season. I know that. But I think they will as soon as the clock strikes 12, he will be having a big offer come his way for sure.
Well, I think a lot of fans would be happy to see that happen, so we can only hope. We wanted to ask you, too, general question about the defense. Can you give me, what do you think the number one biggest signature of Greg Manusky on this defense is? What is his biggest contribution? What do you think's changed the most under his tenure that we can credit Manusky for? Well,
it's aggression. I mean, you are what you're coached, and you are the personality of the person coaching you. And, I don't know if you guys are too young to remember, but I remember when that guy was running down the field for the Redskins on special teams with a mohawk. He was a crazy one. And
that's awesome.
And even when he talks to us every week out of Redskins Park for his normal press conference, there's no smiles in there. It's a very intense, quick to the point presser. And I go back to Joe Barrett, who, I can say this with a straight face, was one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet in your life. The problem was, for me, he was one of the nicest human beings you'd ever meet in your life. I don't want that from my coordinator. I want a guy that, people don't care for at times. And Manusky has the respect of those players. They fear him. Make no mistake about that. And
that's really interesting.
And with him being a former player, you also have another layer of respect, too, because the guys feel like you can relate. You're not just saying stuff and you didn't do it. You've done it yourself. And I'm sure you guys noticed that defense is going downhill the whole game.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been wanting for years here. So, I think his aggression has been the biggest key to what they're doing right now on the field.
Beautiful. Well, we want to be real respectful of your time, and we do have to move on. So, Steve, did you have another question there for Lake? We definitely want to pick his brain as much as we can.
Yeah, real quick. Fast forward to Week 8. What's the Redskins' record?
Ooh, good one. Good one.
So to Week 8. Okay, so we're in Week 5.
I think he means the next 4 games.
After
we have 49ers go to Seattle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. 49ers go to Philly. Then Seattle. I think they beat Philly. Definitely know they're going to beat the Niners. Seattle game will be interesting. I would say they're going to be 4, 3, 5 and 3.
5-3. Okay. I think most fans will take that. You know,
we all
after
take that.
2-2 start.
I'll take that.
I would say 5 and 3, and and you guys have it in front of you because trust me, we've been traveling so much. I'm like I feel like I live on the West Coast. Is the Seattle game is after the Philly game, right? Am I correct on that?
I'm
Yes.
pretty sure that's right. I
Yes.
actually don't have it open right now
No,
myself.
it's definitely after.
But-
Well,
definitely
let me just
after.
say this. If they do win their next 2, they may go into Seattle and beat them too. And I actually probably have them favored too. I think the Rams are going to take care of Seattle tomorrow, and I think it's going to change the shift of things. I think the Redskins actually do have a chance to be maybe a 6-2 football team at some point.
Oh, and actually, it's Niners, Eagles, Cowboys, then Seahawks.
Ooh, and the Cowboy game is
Here.
Is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you may see this team reel off 3 out of those 4. Yeah.
I think fans would be thrilled about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'd be
that
more
would
than
good
happy.
to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they know they let one get away on Monday, and no one felt good. No one wanted to hear anything about moral victories that maybe former teams would have rest their hat on. They felt like, you know what, we let 2 games get away this year because we didn't finish teams off. And the Eagles game, as bad as they played, they had a chance to beat a team that right now is 3-1. That's impressive. They beat the 3-1 Rams team. Then also, you take the only undefeated team in the league down to the final plays, and an Oakland team that was a playoff team last year that's 2-2. So
Yeah.
they haven't played a team with a losing record all year, and they're 2-2. I think that's a good sign for where they're going.
Yep.
Oh, that's absolutely, I love that, and that's a great thought to end on. Folks, Lake Lewis, check him out. USA Today Sports, Redskins Wire, sportsjourney.com. He does it all. Lake Lewis, thank you so much for being on the show, man. This was awesome.
Appreciate you guys. You guys do a great job out there, too, so I'll continue to support what you're doing as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Lake.
so much, man.
You have a good weekend off, extra long weekend.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Take
All right.
care, man.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, man. See ya.
Bye.
All right, folks, that was Lake Lewis. Second time he's been on the show. Awesome guy, super insightful, really good information today.
Nice dude.
Alex, such a nice dude. I know you were surprised by one thing he said, and I was kind of surprised too, particularly about that play calling
Right? Am I
that he
just
talked
dumb?
about
Did I
last
miss
year.
that fact? That
No, I
called
didn't.
Those 2 games?
Maybe at the time we noticed it, but if I knew it, I forgot about it.
I mean, I didn't know that anyone really was aware who exactly was playing calls at any point, who was making
Calling
the
plays.
play calls. Yeah,
Well,
calling plays.
My impression
playing
was
calls.
my impression was that McVay called all the games last year.
Yeah, mine too.
See, you guys had that impression? I had the impression that it was some very weird, twisted game of telephone that went through like 3 or 4 people.
Well, it is that. I mean, but I think what was happening was that Jay would say, "I want to run, I want to pass," and McVay calls it.
Would call the specific
Yeah.
play.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe
Yeah,
Jay
I
would
mean,
be
it's
more
just-
specific. A conservative pass.
Right. I want a conservative pass.
Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
a real quick takeaway from that, Lake said he doesn't think Pryor's the number 1 receiver. He's
Yeah.
flat out said that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wish it were otherwise, but I don't know. It's hard to argue against that. I want to see the guy develop, but it's hard to argue against that.
I mean, you can't argue it with what he's looked like so far. You could certainly make the argument that he's got development to do and he's not grown into the wide receiver, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But based on what we've seen, I think Lake's totally right.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of our receivers look like decent number 2 types at least, but neither of them has had a 100-yard game yet, have they? I mean,
No.
those kind of
Has
numbers you
anyone?
expect from a number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
it is what
the
it
other
is.
the other thing I thought was interesting was that Lake said he did not hear any racial slurs being
Yeah.
yelled at the Kansas City game.
Right.
I mean, I kind of thought honestly that whole thing was a combination of Pryor's frustration, and then he probably did hear something from someone, but I think it was more his frustration over the game than anything else.
There's 70,000 people in the stadium. How are you going to be able to tell?
Single out one voice.
Yeah. It's so hard to say what happens, what doesn't happen. I'm not saying he didn't hear it because I don't know. There's no way to prove it one way or the other at this point.
Yeah, who knows? I'll tell you what. What do you guys think about what he said about Minuski? By the way, do you think that aggression is the number one difference between this year's defense and last?
With it. I mean, look at our last really good defensive coach was Greg Williams, and it's the same thing. It was a guy who played in the league, right, and just kind of he liked to beat people up. You know,
it's also aggression and play calling too, because I mean, Joe Barry never blitzed ever.
Oh no!
Right?
No.
I mean, we were begging him to blitz, but begging him to blitz by the end of the season.
Right.
And
it's not just that though. Let's be fair, because Hazlitt was also a aggressive-minded coach, but just not a good play caller.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a combination of blitzing and a more aggressive attitude, and also they have better players.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, can't forget that. Jonathan
Yeah,
Allen,
that's probably that counts for something. You're right.
Yeah, and then Matt Ioannidis, has made a huge leap. So
drafting
we'll find out
people
more.
who actually can play football.
Who'd have thunk? Who'd have thunk it?
And then getting rid of guys who don't want to play football.
So he said 5-3. By the way, guys, what do you think? Right? Optimistic? Pessimistic?
I'll take it.
I'd be thrilled. Yeah. I'm kind of in the 4-4 range. I don't know if we'll get into that later, but
he also left out the Dallas game too. It's actually,
He had the schedule a little confused.
Yeah, I mean, 49ers, Philly, Dallas, Seattle.
Seattle.
The next 4 games. He for some reason left that out, but he had it in his head, but he didn't mention it. But I mean, I'd take 3-5. That means they go 3-1 in the next 4 games. I'll take it.
Yeah, me too. I would be totally. I think it might be a little bit optimistic, but I would absolutely take it. Obviously, things aren't going well for me. Y'all knew my prediction was, what was it, 6-10?
Yeah,
I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to look very smart. I think this might be my year to fall from my throne of correctly predicting the.
And who was it?
Records.
USA Today had him at 5-11. I think it was USA Today. Somebody had him at 5-11.
I mean, it's the old, no respect line. Rodney Dangerfield line. They never get respect from these guys.
Sure.
They didn't get any respect after they won the NFC East, in 2015 either. So
that's true. Yeah.
I'm past the point of caring what all those, these national media guys predict. I really don't care.
All right, well, maybe we should pause because we are going to bring on our next guest.
Who's actually calling right now.
All right, folks, our next guest is Brandon Thorn. Brandon's an offensive line, defensive line expert, and he spreads the knowledge over at Inside the Pylon and at FanRag Sports. Check him out on Twitter at Veteran Scout if you want to stay in the know. Brandon, welcome to the Hogsty. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you're here for our bye-week spectacular, where we get all the in-depth, hard-hitting reports here about what's going on with the team. So we got plenty of questions to ask you about these lines.
All right. Let's start with Sean Laval because he's certainly not the star of the O-line, but I think he's the one that brings the most controversy. So I think it's safe to say that the fans have wanted him tarred and feathered at various times during his tenure here. The 2017 version of Sean Laval, what do you see in terms of pass pro and run blocking from this guy?
Yeah, Laval's a guy that I've been watching pretty closely for the last couple of years. I know he trains with Charles Bentley at OLP Performance in Arizona. Really hardworking guy. Guy's faced a lot of injuries in his career. And I think that really most of his injuries are in his lower half, below the knee. I think he has some ankle, some knee stuff that he's dealt with. And I think that translates to the field and pass protection with his anchor. He could struggle to anchor sometime. And he lets guys get into his chest at times, and he'll get, I think maybe 1 to 3 times a game, there'll be some kind of ugly plays where he will get overrun. But for the most part, on a snap-to-snap basis, when I watch him, I still see the same player. I still see a guy who's very technically sound, especially in the run game, plays with really good competitive toughness, fits in well, which, alongside Trent Williams. I know, him and Trent, on deuce blocks, double teams, they're pretty devastating. So I think he's a good run blocker and more probably like an average to below average pass blocker and just a guy you can win with, I think. With Trent Williams and Spencer Long there, surrounding him. I think he's a guy who's definitely on the end, towards the end of his probably productive career, probably
sure.
transitioning into that key backup role here soon. But right now I think he's an adequate starter.
But yeah, I mean, I think we agree with you there that the Skins have been looking for his replacement for a while. They just haven't found anybody. Let's flip to the other side at the guard spot. Brandon Scherf. Skins fans, we are in love with the guy. He's had a Pro Bowl last year. He's just knocking guys over now, it looks like, whenever you go back and watch the highlights of the running game for the Redskins. What are your thoughts on him? Is he really becoming as big of a star as we fans think? And how does he compare to some of the other elite NFL guards right now?
Yeah, Scherf is a guy, I loved coming out of Iowa. For him to switch from left tackle to right guard is very impressive. I think he's transitioned very well. He does, I think, everything pretty well. I think really 2 years ago and last year, his issues really were sustaining blocks. I think he fell off some blocks a little bit too much. His hand usage was a little inconsistent, especially at the second level, tend to get a little outside of guys and lose leverage. But this year, I think he's just continually improved in that area, and he's already a good pass protector, really quick and violent with his hands, good hand placement and pass protection. He can get on top of guys and jump set them really well. Against elite competition, he'll still get overpowered a little bit. But, you're talking about guys like Fletcher Cox, and guys that overpower everybody at times. And then in terms of him in the run game, I mentioned the second level. I think he's probably one of, if not the best pullers at right guard in the NFL. Excellent puller, excellent in space, leading. He can also generate movement at the point of attack, in a more man and gap principle blocking schemes, which, Washington and Bill Callahan, they run pretty much everything. So, it fits his skill set. He could do outside zone, inside zone, and he could also, like I said, generate movement at the point of attack, especially with Moses, who, is primarily excels in gap blocking himself. But yes, in terms of how he compares to the rest of the right guards, I think Zach Martin is the elite of the elite. So I don't think he's at that level quite yet in terms of his consistency on a snap-to-snap basis. He's just not quite there. But I do think that, he compares with that next tier of guys like, Gabe Jackson. I really put Martin and Yonda in that top two, but after that, guys like Scherf, Jackson, guys like that are, probably the next guys that I think of.
So
TJ Lang.
Sounds like top five is what you're saying, which I think most teams will take any day of the
week.
I'd
probably say top five.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's considering he was, a top 5 draft pick. One would hope that he would develop like that. But one thing I've noticed about Scherf is I think he's far more athletic than I really realized he would be. We saw him just last week, running 20 yards downfield out, after I think it was Chris Thompson. Athletically, am I wrong? Yeah, is he really that? Does he have an elite level of athleticism in terms of a guard?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah, if you watch, I watch pretty much offensive line, every day. That's what I watch. And in terms of left and right guards, I'd put him in the top 5 easily in terms of athleticism, for sure. I think that athleticism and it also play speed in terms of how fast he actually plays, because there's a lot of athletic guys that don't play fast, but he also plays fast. So I think, Scherf is, he's definitely approaching that elite status, if not already there.
It kind of brings up a larger point about the Skins O-line that I've kind of started noticing, just, as I'm not an O-line expert, but someone who is passionate enough about the game. I don't think there are many lines that are as athletic as the Redskins. Am I right about that at this point, in terms of having so many guys who can get downfield onto that next level as far as linemen? You got Scherf and Trent Williams are arguably some of the best at their position. How would you compare them in that respect with some of the other teams in the league?
Yeah, when I'm looking at the roster, looking at the offensive line, I think Scherf and Williams are definitely in the top 5 if you want to talk about athleticism at their position. Trent Williams, I could make a strong case that he's number 1. And then Spencer Long, he's a guy I wasn't super familiar with prior to this year, but this year he's really impressed me with what he's been pulling, and also in space at the second level. I think he's probably one of the more underrated athletic centers in the game. So those three right there, make up what I think is probably one of the more athletic lines in the game. I mean, when I'm thinking about athletic lines, I mean, the Cowboys come to mind. The Steelers are pretty athletic. But the Redskins, I wouldn't put them much below, probably top 3, top 5. Honestly, they're extremely athletic.
You mentioned Trenton Williams, and obviously he's the superstar of the group. He's in,
Right.
8th year, 9th year now. And one thing I've mentioned on the show in the past couple weeks is that this guy's on every injury report of every year, of every game practically. Is he slowing down at this point? Have you seen any signs in his game that the Redskins are going to have to think about doing something about him in the future? Or is this still the same old Trent at this point?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Trent. I mean, I don't think you can think about really moving on from him or anything like that at this point. I still think, last year, aside from his suspension, I mean, he is top 2 at his position in my mind, no question, and he has been for 2 or 3 years. So if you're, just with that in mind, a top 2 guy at his position, with no signs, in my opinion, of slowing down, then there's no way that I would think about moving on from Trent Williams anytime soon. I mean, if he, the suspension stuff, I think is the most concerning thing. I mean, he needs to really, get that under control because it's just progressively going to get longer and longer each time. So if he can just stay clean off the field, he's dealt with some injuries, but nothing, like Val or anything like that. Sure. I think he's a guy that, you just let Trent be Trent and just, Bill Callahan does a great job with putting him in positions to accentuate his strengths. And I think this is just a great spot for him to kind of, finish the end of his prime, which I think he's kind of just entering that, so I think he still has another few years for sure at this level.
Mm.
Well, it's definitely music to ours to hear that. Now, in terms of Spencer Long,
29,
obviously, I mean, obviously Spencer Long started out as guard. I think we all thought that guard wasn't his place. From a technique standpoint, he wasn't quite there. But center, he seems to have found his home. I know you said you sort of picked up on him this year. In terms of his ability at center, calling pass protection, and just technique as a center, what do you see in Spencer Long?
Yeah, I think he's probably above average center, based on all the other centers that I've seen right now. And considering he's relatively new at the position, it's definitely impressive. He's 26 years old, I believe. Still hasn't started 16 games in his career. So I'd really like to see that happen this year. But once that happens, just based on what I've seen, though, in these 4 games, I think he's really good in pass protection. He's definitely a more athletic center. Good mental processing from what I've seen in terms of recognizing, stunts in line games. I really like his ability to maintain spatial awareness, to his 2 guards. He rarely lets, from what I've seen, leakage come through those A gaps. And he's excellent at looking for work in pass protection and really being aggressive and violent at the point of attack. And, you love to see that. But pretty much the whole line is like that. I mean, that's just kind of their culture. They're extremely physical. And I think Long is, he fits right in that, and I highlighted that quite a bit last week on Twitter.
Sure. Hey, we just want to switch maybe gears a little bit to the defensive line for a minute, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the guy I'm high on for a multitude of reasons for the Redskins has been Ioannidis, who I know he surprised a lot of people, but just as he's been doing like the yeoman-like work lately for the Redskins. Do you think that, other people had expected this kind of improvement? Did you expect any kind of improvement from a guy like that? Is he a legit starter now? I think is the other big question at this point for him.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, just the defense and him, I believe right now I know they like to rotate their defensive line a lot. So, I'm looking at the depth chart: Stacey McGee, Ziggy Hood, Jonathan Allen, the starters, and then Ioannidis, Terrell McLean, kind of as those rotational pieces. But I know that they play quite a bit. From what I've seen of him, I think he offers a little bit more in terms of quickness, in terms of penetration, burst, beating guys around the corner. Offers a little bit more in pass rush. Against the run, I think that's probably why McGee is starting, still, and kind of, he hasn't taken that full-time starter role. I still see him getting moved at the point of attack, and just his awareness in the run game, I still think is getting there. I still think he'll get moved out of his gap at times. Him and McClain to me are sort of that pass rushing help that they could provide as those rotational defensive linemen, whereas Allen, Hood, and McGee are the run stoppers who can offer some in the pass rush department. But
sure.
That's kind of how I look at Ioannidis right now, and I think that he certainly can become a better run blocker as he learns to use his hands a little bit better to keep his chest clean, and stack blockers, and maybe get even a little bit stronger. But yeah, as of right now, I think he's just a really good piece to have, and I think his role it fits him really well right now, not having to necessarily start. But I do foresee that happening with him for sure.
Okay, well, obviously the big name on the defensive line this year is Jonathan Allen, who was the Redskins' 17th first-round draft pick at 17, and I think everybody collectively thought that he fell to 17 and was at one point a top 5 pick. I've always thought of Jonathan Allen as more of a run stopper. We have seen him get penetration in the interior line this year, on pass plays, and we've also seen them move him around a little bit. What I'm curious about is what do you see from Allen in terms of his potential to someday become, the goal is for him to become the next defensive line superstar. Can he get there? What do you see?
Yeah, superstar I'm not entirely sure of. A very good player, though, I definitely see. Allen's my favorite guy on probably the whole defense. I really like Kerrigan as well, but Allen to me, I loved him coming out. I think the way that he uses his hands and the pad level and leverage and strength that he plays with is pretty devastating. So in terms of run blocking, those traits translate very well, and we've seen that, I think, a lot. The Raiders tape is just incredible. The way he fought Kelechi Osemele was, I just don't see that very often. Kelechi Osemele typically bullies people, and he wasn't really able to do that to Jonathan Allen. So, and just the other tapes I've seen of him as well, that leverage, the pad level, the play strength, and the hand usage with him is outstanding. So just that alone as a defensive lineman, I think will translate to the pass rush. It's just in terms of stringing moves together and being able to have multiple moves as a pass rusher, that's something that most rookies don't have, and, especially interior guys. So it's just going to take some time, I think.
Sure.
But what he can do in the run game right now, I think he's just incredible. I think he's already a good to very good run defending guy, as a rookie. But yeah, I think the sky's the limit for him. I don't see the elite athleticism necessarily, but he's a 3-4 defensive lineman. You're not going to really expect that. But for what his role is, I think, you guys land. That was a great draft pick. Maybe definitely one of the best values in the first round, for sure. I don't think there's any question about that. So Allen, to me, I don't know if I would say superstar necessarily, but if you want to think in terms of like a Leonard Williams type, he doesn't quite have that length and that size of Leonard Williams, but I kind of see a similar type of player in terms of what he can do in the run game.
Well, okay, so I have one really last question that has kind of been puzzling me about the Redskins' defense this year. Since they've switched to the 3-4, which has been almost 8 years, they've yet to ever have a great nose tackle on this defense. And I've always felt like that's been a big struggle for them. Yet this year we're finally seeing a lot of good production, despite still not really using a nose tackle all that often for a 3-4. What has changed? What's different about what they're doing that's made them more effective?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, Ziggy Hood and Stacey McGee, back of nose tackles that I'd say those guys are, average.
At best,
they're above
at
average.
times, I
Maybe.
feel.
Yeah, I mean, they're that's just kind of who they are. So I do think if you did get a premier nose tackle, think like Michael Pierce, Brandon Williams, Damon Harrison, those type of guys in this defense would go to the next level. So looking at the depth chart, I agree that's probably one of the weak spots. But yeah, I mean, this year I just think their physicality and I don't know how you guys feel about Scott McLuhan, but his fingerprints are all over this team, in my opinion. Just if you look at his track record, the way he's built football teams, I mean, Ryan Anderson, Jonathan Allen, you got guys like Preston Smith. I mean, these are all guys who are uber athletic, but not uber athletic, uber physical and aggressive.
Right.
And it bleeds through the whole defense. I mean, the linebacking core, Spate is another guy. I mean, I was watching the tape. I mean, that guy, extremely physical all over the ball. And then, at safety, you got guys that are, killing people too, and I just think the physicality is impressive. They're the least penalized defense in the league, which is impressive, considering how physical they are. I think
Sure.
that was, in some of my research, I was doing, I thought that was impressive. Their defensive line ranks fifth in DVOA pass rush. So I think right now, the front seven in general is more of a pass rushing type of team, can really get after the passer with their edge rushers, who I think are one of the most underrated duos in the league. And then you got guys coming off, supplementing them like Junior Gillette and, Ryan Anderson eventually, working in more and more. So, I think really the team is built to rush the passer a little bit more than stop the run in general.
Sure.
But the defensive line, like you said, I think they're just going to keep getting better, but I do think nose tackle is a position that, ultimately they need to address sooner rather than later, for sure, to really take that next step.
One more for you before we let you go. I think Preston Smith is the other guy that surprised a little bit this year. He's another one of these Scott McLuhan, guys that are supposed to be very physical. He's had 4 sacks this year. So from a result standpoint, he's gotten better. We've also seen questions about his effort and work ethic and whatnot. Has Preston Smith really taken another step here this year, or are we just seeing him on a hot streak? What's going on with Preston Smith?
I think a little bit has to do with Jonathan Allen, playing, because I think I've seen Jonathan Allen for the most part at the right defensive end spot, where Preston Smith is that, lines up on that right side a lot of the time. And I think, he's taken a lot of attention away from him. But then you also have guys like Kerrigan, McLean even is a pretty decent pass rusher, at D-line, and just the rotation and the amount of guys that you can send after the passer, I think is naturally taken away some attention more and more from Preston Smith, allowing him to get more of those one-on-one type situations. And I think he's a good pass rusher. I mean, he really uses his hands well. He can corner and bend. Good length. I really like his long arm technique to, keep guys off him and reduce the blocking surface for offensive linemen. It's hard to get your hands on him sometimes as a pass protector. So I like Preston Smith. I think he's going to continually get better. Really good physical profile. And yeah, Preston Smith has been a guy I really liked coming out of college, and I'm just glad to see him sort of get some of that attention taken away from him and get more of those one-on-one type of situations, which I think he can beat most left tackles in the NFL at a pretty consistent basis.
Beautiful. That's another one of those things all of us fans want to hear. So this was awesome, Brandon. Your knowledge here of offensive, defensive line strategy and personnel is nothing short of intimidating. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Is there anything we missed? Any big headlines, offensive, defensive line you want to call out?
No, not really. I mean, Ty Neshke is a guy that I, kind of wrote about in the preseason a little bit as one of the most valuable backup offensive linemen in the league. I think he recently got hurt. But,
yeah, he's out about 6 weeks.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I think that, as long as Moses and Williams stay healthy, then no problem. But, I think, he's definitely a valuable guy. that doesn't really get talked about. I know he's older in his career, really fascinating career as well, which I know you guys probably know about, just the way he's bounced around and stuff. But he's just a guy I thought, we should mention and just talk about is, I think he's one of the top 3 or 5 most valuable backup offensive linemen in the league.
Yeah, we actually had him on our show way before he even had his first start for the Redskins. He came on our show.
Yeah, way back in the day.
Yeah, cool. Like 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. He's a nice dude.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Well, like we said, Brandon, thank you so much. This was really awesome, and we would love to have you back on the show if you can ever spare a little time for a little operation like us. We would love to have you back, man.
Oh, yeah, man, of course. I'd love to. I love talking ball, and I really like watching the Redskins play. So.
Great.
Oh, there we go. We all have that in common. Thank you so much, Brandon. We will catch up with you later, man.
Same to you guys. See you.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. That was Brandon Thorn at Veteran Scout on Twitter. If you want to check him out, awesome guy, as you obviously heard. He knows a lot about what he's talking about. FanRag Sports, Inside the Pylon. Check him out, Brandon Thorn. What did you guys think about that interview? Really, really exhaustive knowledge here of the team.
Well, yeah, not only that, but the reason why we had him on in the first place was that he was putting a bunch of really great breakdowns out on Twitter about the Redskins' offensive line. That's what brought him to our attention first. So really go check him out there. But first and foremost, I think I'm glad to hear that he's not seeing anything about Trent sliding. So because that's gone through my head. I really wanted to ask somebody who knows more than we do about offensive line whether that was happening, because considering the magnitude of his little nicks, he has every year. It's good to see, so we assume if he's got maybe 3 or 4 more years left at the top level, that's great news. And then the other thing is he seems to be fairly high. He's higher than we are on Sean Laval, which seems to be a sort of the fans hate him, and yet a lot of the O-line experts
seem to defend him.
Opinion of him.
Well, I think fans forget to put it in context that Sean Laval is the weak link on a very strong chain. There aren't that many guards out there who are much better than him. Like if Scherf is in the top 5, Laval's probably still in the top 30. Like he deserves a starting spot. It's not like he's a backup playing a job.
I hope he's higher than top 30, for God's sakes.
Well, you know what I mean.
That would mean he's the 3rd worst guard in the league, starting guard in the league.
No.
He means between left and right.
I'm combining left and right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit better odds there.
He's in the
Not
top
much.
half of the league of all guards.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I mean, he's inconsistent at times, and we've seen him. Right. Was it last week where he was splayed out on the ground, while Cousins was being,
Yeah, where he kind of tripped over his own foot.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that happen.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think he probably gets a little bit more criticism heaped on him than is necessary, simply because he is the weak link on this O-line, and we're spoiled and have been for many years now with a high-quality O-line.
Yeah.
And so I think that's fair to say. And the other thing I liked about what Brandon was saying is Scherf. I mean, when you draft Brandon Scherf at was he number 4 or number 5
I think.
overall?
5.
Yeah. When you draft a guy who was supposed to be a tackle who's turned into a guard at number 5, what you want is Pro Bowls and top 5, and that is exactly where Brandon placed him, which is that's where he needs to be, to have that draft pick work out.
Right. I agree with you, and I think just to touch on the Trent Williams thing real quick, one of those topics people love to bring up is, let's move Trent to guard. Let's move Trent to guard. People seem to be obsessed with that idea. I think it's
you just don't want to get rid of your top talent. You want to find him a spot somewhere else.
Right.
Let him play quarterback.
Yeah. No, Brandon Scherf played quarterback, remember. Not
there
Trent.
you go.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Keep him on the team.
But
the point is, I think it's too early for that.
Yeah.
No,
maybe when he's 33, we need to have that conversation, not at 29.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize he was still 29. For some reason, it feels like he's been on this team for forever. But I know it hasn't.
He's been on this team for almost 10
that.
years now. It feels like, yeah.
Is it 7 or is it 10?
No, it's 7.
7?
Okay. No, I think
it's
8 actually, not 7. I think he was 2010, right? And so I think this is year 8 for him. It does seem like he's been a 15-year vet or something. It
really does.
Well, in the NFL today, an 8-year vet is almost like a 15. There aren't that many of them.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I just can't believe he's my age and he's made so much more money. But anyways, that's a conversation for another time.
So much more successful. Just wait till he hits
infinite.
33 and you see guys like that, Sean. It's even better.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to it, let me tell you. Okay, well, let's move on from there. We had some other things that dropped in the news this week, particularly about Mr. Josh Norman. So what do we want to talk about with the context of replacing Josh Norman? Eek.
Yeah, I mean,
Eek.
Josh Norman himself tweeted out that he was his injury is going to be a 4-week injury. And
fractured rib is what it was, right?
Well, yeah, it's more than it. We had a nurse chime in on Twitter with us about this injury, so I think I have a little bit more
interesting
info. Yeah, she sent
me
nurse thing from the. Yeah, she sent me a thing from the Mayo Clinic actually about this. So he does have a cracked rib, but
this is the Hogstye's new medical expert. Just so you know, I like this.
There you go. Yeah, just definitely not me. But he's got also an internal injury with this to go, not just the cracked rib. And what she said, it could be something called a pleurisy. Now, basically, there's a lining inside the lungs, and then there's a lining outside the lungs that keep the lungs separate from the ribs, and that has been irritated by the broken rib, which isn't necessarily an injury that it's more of a pain tolerance thing more than anything. But that is what Miss Random Nurse says is the other injury that Josh has that goes along with the broken rib. So thank you.
Gotcha. I'm no expert either, but I do. Sorry, not to interrupt. I do know. I think pleurisy is pretty serious. That's like fluid in your lungs. Yikes.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, it has to do with
the rib injury.
Yeah, the lining of the lungs.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was courtesy of at Hillary Banks. So thank you, Miss whoever you are.
Well,
that's the daughter from Fresh Prince. Yeah, that's the daughter from Fresh Prince. Oh my God!
I don't think she's the daughter of Fresh Prince because I'm not sure she would know how to spell pleurisy if that was the case. So.
Awesome Twitter name though. If that's your real name, that's even cooler.
Yeah. Or I'm sorry for your tough childhood.
Yeah.
Right.
But the real question is, what do we do about Josh? And quite honestly, I'm not as concerned about it than I would be just because of who we're playing.
Right.
I mean, we've got a terrible, passing game in the 49ers. Then the Eagles, Dallas, and Seattle. It's not that I think we're better without him, but we're not facing Antonio Brown.
I don't think anybody would think we're better without him. I'm a little worried about the Eagles because they have a bunch of very good wide receivers. Maybe not an elite one, but the Niners. I mean, I'm pretty sure we could play cover no corners the entire time, and we could still beat the Niners defensively. I'm not worried about them. So at least
they're going to kick our ass just because you said that.
Oh, great.
Well, and even Dallas. I mean, we've got Des Bryant, but Bashad Breeland has matched up well with him in the past. So
true.
Right.
I'm fairly confident that we will get through it. But the question is, what do we do to replace him? Well, the obvious answer is Kendall Fuller and Moreau. One of those two guys, Fabian Moreau.
Yeah.
Well, you say that, but what I thought was interesting in the Chiefs game is the go-to guy seemed to be Quentin Dunbar to replace
He was certainly
Norman.
in there. He was one of them, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to overlook him. I think all three of those guys have played pretty well. I think Kendall Fuller in particular has taken a huge step up. So when we're talking about replacing Norman against at least one or maybe two substandard wide receiver core in passing games,
right?
Because Dallas, Dak Prescott, had a great year, but I'm not sure he's a huge threat to really carry a game if he has to pass 50 times a game. That's not what Dallas is.
No.
So I'm fairly confident that we will survive with some combination of Moreau, Fuller, and Dunbar replacing Josh Norman.
Yeah, it'll be a drop-off, but I'm fairly confident, as you put it, in survival as well. Steve, I'm sorry if you already said this, but did they clarify at all the timeline here on this injury?
Well, Josh Norman himself clarified it and tweeted out 4 weeks. So, what he was unclear about, of course, is did he mean 4 weeks from the Kansas City game or 4 weeks from this week? And
from
so
now.
he was a little unclear about what game he meant that he's going to be back. So,
gotcha.
It could be Philly or what's the third game?
Dallas is the third
it
game.
Could be Seattle. Yeah. So we
don't
really know. It's tell Josh to be more clear in his tweeting next time.
Well, the only thing that I would kind of say to, not even as a disagreement, is I kind of feel like you want to keep Fuller in the slot as much as possible even with the injury, just so he can keep staying familiar with that position and how to play that position, because you don't want him to have to get into some bad habits from playing on the edge. But
yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, because look, Moreau is the guy with the elite athleticism and the potential to be a number one corner.
Yeah, they're both they both kind of have that potential to begin with. But yeah, I'm with you.
I think Moreau has more of it.
Sure.
And Dunbar, we all love Dunbar. Is he going to be a number one corner? I don't know if he's ever going to get there, but Moreau certainly could.
Right.
And so I think if you have to just dump a guy in to start for Josh Norman, if it were me, it would be Moreau for that reason. And for the reason you said, yeah, keep Kendall in the slot.
Sorry about that. I was just talking to myself on mute for about 40 seconds, everybody at home. Do you ever do that?
I'm sure it's...
Because I do that all the damn time.
I'm sure you had wonderful thoughts to yourself.
Yeah, I did.
Really I don't know.
Silence.
I think we'll leave that in there.
Yeah, leave it in. Leave it in. Might as well. Okay, what I was trying to say was, do we have any other injury reports or any other roster moves that were made this week that we want to go over before letting people get back to their lives?
Well, the bye's coming at a good time because we've got a lot of guys, nicked up. The one that's the serious one, we mentioned it with Brandon, is Ty and Seki.
Right.
And Ty and Seki's got what they call a core injury now. So, yeah, he had surgery, and, he's, I think, at least 5 weeks out. But the rest of these guys that were banged up, I think are all going to be fine. The big one's Jordan Reed. He's going to have 2 weeks. He's going to have the bye week. So... Jay said in the last press.
Did we ever find out? Is it just a full broken toe with him, or what? Like
they never. They kind of. They never really said. What the toe thing was. The injury that he's down that is listed now is sternum.
Oh, okay.
Not toe.
And that's nowhere near your toe.
It's like the opposite.
That's nowhere near toe. But it was, I think, apparent to everybody that he wasn't 100% last week.
Yeah.
Jay Gruden said he wasn't 100%. So hopefully this time off, we can see that. And you saw, Lake mentioned it earlier in the show, with Jordan Reed being, 100% open and available and ready to go, that's going to open things up for Jamison Crowder. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll change the whole offense if he's back.
Jameson's been practically invisible for the past 4 weeks.
Yeah. He had a couple big screen passes for first downs in Oakland, and did he have one the week before that too? I don't quite remember.
In LA?
Yeah,
maybe.
slept since then.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay, so, but in terms of roster moves, I think the big roster move they made was that poor Alex Torgensen, quarterback, practice squad, is no longer Alex Torgensen practice squad. He is Alex Torgensen, private citizen, because they cut him.
Oh,
yeah, too bad. And in his place, the Redskins signed Joel Stave, who is from University of Wisconsin. He's bounced around between the Vikings, the Seahawks, and the Chiefs, all in the practice squad. He's never been active. He's never been off the practice squad. He's a camp arm. Not a camp arm. He's a practice arm.
Yeah.
A big kid, 6'4", 230. His
Wow.
stats at Wisconsin were, he was a 59.5% completion percentage at Wisconsin, which in the world of college is not that great.
Right.
But he did
well,
have...
in the world of college to the NFL, yeah.
Yeah, and
in college you can get by.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see most of the big college prospects who, I'm not talking about the Lamar Jacksons of the world, but the sort of the pro-ready college prospects are all in college at mid-60s and up.
Yeah, I know. Like
percentage.
borderline 70% completion rating now. It's absurd.
Yeah. Now, he did have 129.9 quarterback rating, but I believe that is the college rating, which is slightly different than the NFL's.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so that's Joel Stave. Welcome to the team, Joel. I'm sure we will never hear from you ever again this year because you were on the practice squad. It would really take a disaster to have you on an active roster.
I hope we never really hear from him. We've said that about
I hope he doesn't
quarterbacks
listen to this
before.
show. He's going to be really upset.
I wish him the best. I'm just saying. I hope we don't have enough injuries that he has to be active.
To be fair,
that's fair.
most third-string quarterbacks know that if they're there, it's a real problem.
This is true.
More
I think
like
you have to have a
3.5
thick skin.
String. He's more like a 3.5 string because really and truly, if disaster strikes, Terrell Pryor is going to be the quarterback.
But not well for an extended period
not
of
as
time.
a start,
not
as a start, but yeah. But if in the middle of the game everybody gets hurt, they're going to Terrell Pryor, whether or not Joel Stave is on any roster.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, with all that in mind, we are going to let you guys go. Now, we have the 49ers, I believe, we're at home against the 49ers on the 15th, so that's 8 days from now. So the next time you guys hear from us, we will be giving you a preview of that game. Until then, enjoy your lives. Do something else. It's the bye week. Get away from the stress and have fun. See you guys later.